Good evening, everybody. This is Jamil. Say something. Good evening, everybody. This is Jamil Glenn from Primetime Entrepreneur. I am speaking with a leading economist, Rutgers, New Jersey graduate, and Ph.D. from Notre University. Dr. Celestine Chukumba is an economist who owns and operates a digital media company, InterSearchMedia. I believe this brother is a statistical genius who's going to give us a wonderful insight on our present and future economy. Welcome to Primetime Entrepreneur.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. So before we get started, I just wanted to, I know I was able to give my listeners kind of an intro, but I was wondering if you can just give like a little brief background on your experience and your history, just a bit.
Sure. My background is in economics. I got my Ph.D. from the University of Notre Dame, actually in econometrics and economics, which is more of the statistics side of things. Taught at Penn State for a couple of years, right when the whole Napster thing was happening. I started a website called collegedj.net, which was a file sharing platform for college DJs. This was pretty much at the time when around 2005, record labels were still sending vinyl out to DJs. This was around the time where if you downloaded a file, you could be sued a few $1 million from Napster. This was around that same time. And I was teaching at a university with a file sharing company. After a couple of years of doing that pretty successfully, I knew the digital world was where I wanted to be. I left a very comfy tenure track position at Penn State University and started working in the digital space in New York City as a contractor. Then I started my own company in about 2007 called InterSearchMedia. Basically, I was working with another company. I brought in a big client. Actually, that client was MTV. And in the contract that I had with the company, I had what I call laughably the Chukumba clause, which basically stated that if I ever left, then the contract was null and void. And pretty much a few days after they signed the contract, I told them, we can either share this client or I'm leaving. And so InterSearchMedia's first client was MTV. So my background has been in the digital space from 2007, and you know I think I've seen a lot of the contracting world. So I think it's a great time to talk about this topic.
Awesome. And listen, I really thank you for being here. I think this is going to be a game changer podcast. So I'm just going to dive right into it because I've been so excited to do this for so long. So let me set the backstory. You already know this backstory. The listeners already know this backstory. So here's what happens. Let me set it. COVID happens, right? Everybody's inching along life and everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. You know, you're growing a family, you're working at a job for however many long. The millennials come in, kind of interrupt the pattern a little bit, say they don't work at a job as long as the Gen X and the baby boomers do. They kind of bouncing around a little bit. And then you see a little bit of like little drops in analytics where people are kind of like doing certain things to make money, where they're making their own hours and doing the kind of things they want to do. They're not considered actual entrepreneurs, but they're doing what they got to do to put food on the table. COVID happens, people lose their jobs, the government kind of assists in some ways. But what happens is, what I've noticed, and you let me know if I'm right or wrong, this gig economy approaches Amazon, Instacart, your local food markets, your Wegmans, your ShopRite, your Acme's. And what happens is, like, now all of a sudden, everybody is utilizing this time to make money because they're utilizing this time to make money because it's flexibility. They're making the kind of money that they want. And then also on top of that, they can pay the amount of taxes that they want to pay because at the end of the day, they can set their expenses at whatever they want to be able to pay the government. My first question to you is, doctors, do you think that this gig economy is a peephole into the future?
I do, in many ways, think that COVID sort of advanced many trends that were already in place, but kind of got kickstarted a bit more because of the pandemic. the ability for contractors to work and grow and work virtually is something that's now commonplace. When I first started out in 2007, I was commuting to New York City from about an hour and a half away. And, I was always trying to get remote work if possible. Do you guys have any flexibility so I can work from home? And it was out of the question back in the day. And now it seems like it's going to be ubiquitous. It's going to be something that you pretty much expect when you walk up to an employer's office that, hey, I'm willing to come in, but do you have any flexibility? I don't know how productive that is yet. And so remember that capital needs to find a place where it's most productive. And this whole attitude of, well, there'll be some people that work on Monday, and then some people who do the condensed week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and then there'll be others who work on Friday. That model can work, and it does have some problems. If you're a contractor, well, you're kind of already doing that. If you are a displaced worker from COVID, you've been forced to do that. If you are a person who is employed by another entity after the pandemic, who knows if you'll have to go back to work, right?
Right. So let me dive into that track a little bit more, because the gig economy was one portion of it, but then the opposite side of it was the remote work, right? So there's one huge article that I had to reschedule this meeting based upon this article. Google workers are now insisting for remote work. They were promised remote work at the beginning of the pandemic for indefinitely. Now they're saying you need to come back to work, and people are like, "Why do I need to do it?" And employees across all different employment types are now saying, you want me to come back to work, but it's not necessary. I did this for a year. It's not necessary. I'm still productive. Like, why are you making me do this? So I want you made a point. Capital needs to find something that works, right? So like, will employers start paying less for remote work? Will employees be able to accept that? And then also, because there's some time, like, okay, well, Monday I'm going to give all my full effort. Tuesday I may not. Wednesday I'm going to give all my full effort. Thursday I may not. Does that open the door for them to pick up other opportunities to make more money? And where does that leave the company at the end of the day? Because they're not getting the quintessential 8-hour employee, 40 hours a week anymore, where they can kind of condense their schedule and pretty much be flexible at the end of the day.
Right. There are a few things that I think are important for people to remember. One is that although employers were very flexible, that was, in the middle of the pandemic when they had to be. And there's a political correctness in doing so. You can't in the middle of a pandemic say, hey, guys, we want you back in September, no matter what, right? So people are allowing employees to do what we know was kind of happening anyway. The office was becoming a bit more virtual. However, there does become a point where you have what we call Slack. And I don't mean the platform for sharing. I mean employees, not working and shunning some of their responsibility because they're not being watched. And so co-location also has other benefits aside from just the fact that someone is overseeing what you're doing, if you will. Co-location helps because people are able to put together ideas. We as human beings have a natural instinct to co-locate and to talk together, to join and to come up with ideas. It is hard to brainstorm virtually when you can run upstairs and say, hey, I just had a quick idea, rather than maybe, send an email to someone and maybe they respond in a day or two.
So I guess my next question is kind of centered around, do you think that this would have potentially happened anyway, even if COVID never existed? Do you think that we would have moved to a more remote, siloed environment if COVID never happened?
I think so. Probably not as rapidly. And I don't think there are definitely some sectors who would have chosen not to do it at all had they not to. I mean, if you think about like a trading floor on Wall Street where you've got 20 guys, sitting next to each other, literally sharing ideas right on the fly as it happens, moving millions and millions of dollars, they cannot have technical difficulties.
Right.
They can't have the Zoom meeting go down. And even the Wall Street crowd has figured that, they're going to need to be able to operate virtually. But, is it optimal is the question. And that is still something that people are trying to work out. There are some studies coming out that say, this does have some benefits, and there are those that say that there are some other issues. And some of these issues are social issues, such as depression and loneliness, which are hard to quantify.
If we did, is this process affecting African Americans in terms of in the labor market? Is this going to affect us in terms of like the future of the labor market? Because you have mentioned that yes, this probably would have happened without COVID, and we probably need some other devices to be able to understand the productivity of the worker. But is this going to affect the African American community if we move into this process? Because it was mentioned that yes, we are moving to a more entrepreneurial environment, but a lot of African Americans are more in the service end of the environment, and that could be difficult moving into the future.
There are going to be winners and losers, right? And I would say that those people who are the lower wage workers, which tend to be people of color sometimes, might have to struggle with that ability to work virtually, because many of the positions that they're in don't have that capacity sometimes. But then there's dexterity among African Americans. You're going to have some who are entrepreneurs, who this is going to actually benefit. I'd be more worried about wage inflation, especially in the current environment, than I would the impact of contract work longer term. I think that if offices don't open back up, then you don't have people cleaning those offices. If offices don't open back up, you don't have bus drivers driving those buses. Many of these people were considered essential, and they were, in the time of the pandemic, African Americans who contracted COVID a little bit more. Some say because of those reasons. So there will be some winners and losers in this, and it all depends. And so I think that if the economy opens back up, those with the ability to work virtually will still be okay. So I think it will benefit people of color if the economy opens up, if we're considering the fact that some of these jobs that are low wage jobs go to them as well. So that is something to consider.
They're test driving cars that drive themselves now. The AI implementation is really in full-fledged right now. So you add this component and you add the AI component, and you're talking about the loser end of this spectrum. What happens to those people? What happens to those people in their participation in this economy?
I think we need to start telling some utter truths to our community. And I think this is probably the time to begin to do such a thing. And we're going to have to transition, like the rest of the world, into this sort of digital economy to some extent. And that takes many different shapes, right? So that doesn't mean you need to code. That may mean that you may need to go to a tech program and learn how to plumb or be a plumber or learn how to be an electrician. And many of those things that you're doing now, those old school jobs, if you will, still require a heavy amount of digitization and knowledge of sort of, the Internet of Things and how to the Internet itself and how it works. So we're going to have to transition as much as possible, as many people as possible, into the new digital economy. And that's going to take some education. That's going to take some training. That doesn't necessarily mean college. It may mean just rethinking how we even internally mentor each other. It may mean, how it may mean that people may need to do a bit more than rely on the government for these specific training training tools that we need them.
And I hate to throw you another curveball here, but like, do you think there's going to be a year that we're going to be 100% reliant digitally?
I don't know if I will live to see it, but I know that ultimately, if capital finds that it's more productive that way, that's what we're going to see. You know, if the trend of people working for home is more productive than us co-locating, that's what eventually will happen. And you know, there are some savings for companies. They're not paying for office equipment, right? They're not paying for housing the worker anymore in a different way, and they're not paying for a lot of extra amenities like business travel, for example. But once you get to the point where you've got this quasi thing going on, which we have now, which you've got sort of this kind of virtual world, but not virtual, the people who hop on that plane to do that deal are going to get the deal done.
Mm.
That face-to-face ability to get somebody to close and sign a contract, that's not going to change, because there's still going to be a need for people to actually look at you and trust you. And there's a trust in meeting someone in that handshake. So I do think that there will always be a need for people to interact, and I just don't know how much. You know, you think of the e-commerce, how it blew up enormously during COVID, but there are still some things that we know. We know that when people walk into a store to try on clothes, the first thing they do is they touch the fabric of the clothes.
Yes, you're 100%.
That's not going to change. However, I know my size in Ralph Lauren. I don't have to try the fabric. I don't have to do anything. I know what I wear. I can just order it, right?
Right.
But if they have a new jacket, I might want to touch it and see it,
Right.
and try it on. So it's really hard to say. I do think that we will see over time less of a need to co-locate. But I do think there are going to be certain sectors where the productivity just has to be related to people co-locating.
I wanted you to kind of dive into InterSearchMedia. I want you to kind of dive in about the company, and I want you to dive into the customers that you represent. I wanted my fans to know all about it, because I think that you come from a different perspective, come from an economical perspective, and I've never heard anybody say this is a race to get your customer's credit card, because it's important, right? You want them to be able to have. I know when I go to Amazon and I need something, if I need like new trash bags, they ask me, hey, do you want me to send this to you every 2 weeks? And I'm paying for trash bags every 2 weeks. And I got a whole cabinet full of trash bags I don't even need anymore, but they're still sending them to me, and I don't stop it. So I think that people would love to be able to work with a company like yours, because somebody with your mindset could definitely be able to gauge and increase engagement with a lot of different customers. So I wanted you to spend this time talking about your company, if you don't mind.
Sure. InterSearchMedia is a boutique full-service digital marketing firm. We do everything from social media to SEO to paid search to web analytics. We've worked with clients that run the gambit from Mariah Carey to Home Depot to politicians. We've done strategy for mayors. We've done strategy for people that were musicians. I mean, we really work with everyone. And right now, a bunch of our clients are in the luxury space, and we transitioned towards the luxury space, getting closer to COVID, because, you know, as you can imagine, the have-nots versus the haves during COVID were significant. And so, you know, you needed to transition your business towards people who weren't losing money during this time period. And we noticed the trend in luxury was still solid throughout the pandemic. So we've been focused on luxury and all things media. As I mentioned, my first client was MTV. So we've worked with likes of Showtime, MTV, all the big names to help them get more traffic, to learn more about the user base that they have and how to keep them, and sort of to just generate more revenue.
Perfect. All right, and that is Dr. Celestine Chukumba. Thank you, brother, for coming on the show. There's a lot of good quotes here. There's a lot of good content here, and I just can't wait to share it with my visitors. Thank you so much for coming, and hopefully we could be lifelong friends and just kick strategy together back and forth.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Thanks for having me, and I'd love to come on any other time you'd like to have me.
Thank you, doctor.
All right.